Psalm 46. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. There are seasons when the noise of life grows loud, when the ground beneath us trembles, and the waves of uncertainty threaten to pull us under. In those moments, fear can cloud our vision, and anxiety can steal our peace. But it is into this very chaos that the voice of God speaks gently, yet powerfully. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46 is a song of refuge, a declaration of divine strength in the face of upheaval. It opens not with fear, but with confidence. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way, and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. This is not the absence of trouble, but peace within it. The psalmist does not pretend that storms don't come. He speaks of roaring waters, shaking mountains and nations in uproar. But through it all, there is one steady truth. God is in the midst of it, unmoved, unshaken. The very presence of the Almighty becomes a fortress for His people. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. Even in the turmoil, there is a quiet stream, a symbol of His sustaining presence. It brings joy, life and peace to those who dwell in His presence. Though enemies may rise, though kingdoms may falter, the Lord Almighty remains. His voice silences the earth. His power holds the chaos. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. What comfort it brings to remember that the same God who walked with Jacob, the one who wrestled in the dark, who fled and returned, who failed and was still chosen, is the God who walks with us now. We may not always see the way forward. We may not always feel strong, but in the stillness we find Him. God does not shout over the storm. He calls us into stillness within it. He invites us to lay down our striving, to set aside our panic, and to rest in the unchanging truth that He is God. He is not distant. He is not indifferent. He is present, our refuge, our strength, our ever-present help. So when the world feels overwhelming, when the future feels uncertain, when your heart is racing and your thoughts are spinning, pause, breathe, be still, and remember who He is. He is the creator of the heavens and the earth. He is the one who parted seas and raised the dead. He is the one who sees you in the quiet of your room, in the depth of your pain, in the middle of your questions. And He is God. He will be exalted. He will be glorified, not just in the calm, but in the chaos. Not just when life makes sense, but even when it doesn't. He is working all things for good. He is surrounding you with His love. He is fighting your battles, even when you can't see it. So let this psalm be a gentle reminder to your heart. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are held by the everlasting arms of a God who never fails. The world may shake, your heart may tremble, but His presence will never leave you. And in the stillness, you will find Him, for He is God, and He is with you, always. Psalm 62. My soul finds rest in God alone. Truly my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from Him. There are seasons in life when the soul grows tired, not from labor alone but from the weight of uncertainty, the sting of betrayal, the silence that follows long after the storm. It is in these quiet moments where all other comforts fail that the soul begins to search for something deeper, something eternal. King David, no stranger to sorrow, danger or delay, found himself in such a place. Surrounded by enemies, hunted by those who once called him friend, he turned not to the strength of men or the stability of position, but to God alone. He wrote, "Truly my soul finds rest in God, not in armies, not in allies, not even in resolution." His rest was found in the presence of the Almighty, a fortress of peace in the midst of chaos. "They fully intend to topple me," David confessed, likening himself to a leaning wall and a tottering fence. The opposition was real, the pressure relentless. He was not pretending strength. He was proclaiming trust. He was not boasting in power. He was anchoring his hope. And so he preached to his own soul, Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from Him. It was a sacred reminder, a declaration in the darkness, a call to the weary parts of his heart to return to their only true shelter. He alone is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. This was not just poetic language. It was his lifeline. When the voices of fear and doubt grew loud, David reminded himself of what was unchanging. God had been his help before. God would not fail him now. His honor, his future, his very breath. David laid it all before the Lord. My salvation and my honor depend on God, not on circumstances, not on outcomes, but on the faithfulness of the one who had never forsaken him. And then, in a whisper that echoes through generations, David turned outward and invited all who would listen. Trust in him at all times. You people, pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. He spoke not from theory but experience. He had poured out his heart in caves, on battlefields, in songs of sorrow and praise. And every time God had met him there, surely the lowborn are but a breath, the highborn are but a lie. If weighed on a balance, they are nothing. In contrast to God's steadfastness, David saw the emptiness of human pride. Riches fade, power crumbles. Even the strongest among men are fleeting like vapor on the wind. Do not trust in extortion or put vain hope in stolen goods. Though your riches increase, do not set your heart on them. David had tasted both poverty and prosperity. He knew that wealth, though tempting, could never bring peace. Only God could quiet the soul. One thing God had spoken, two things David had heard: that you, O God, are strong, and that you, O Lord, are loving. This was the anchor, the unshakable truth. God is both powerful and kind, sovereign and merciful, mighty enough to rescue, tender enough to care. You reward everyone according to what they have done. David's trust was not only in who God is, but in what God sees. Every tear shed in silence, every act of faithfulness in the unseen, God remembers, God will reward. And so to the weary heart, Psalm 62 becomes a refuge, a call to cease striving, a gentle invitation. Be still, pour out your heart, let go of what cannot save, and find rest in the arms of the one who never fails. When the world feels unstable, when your heart feels restless, when hope seems just beyond reach, remember David's words. Let your soul return to its quiet place, for truly, truly, your rest is found in God alone. Psalm 103. The Lord is compassionate and full of mercy. The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. The sun hung low over the hills of Judah, as David sat alone, his harp resting beside him, the winds whispering through the olive trees. His heart was full, not with anxiety or fear, but with remembrance. He looked back on his life, the highs and the lows, the triumphs and the failures, and in all of it he saw one constant: God's mercy. David closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He knew how often he had stumbled. He remembered the moments when shame weighed heavy, when he had fallen far from the path of righteousness. But he also remembered something deeper still: the goodness of the Lord, who had never turned away. Bless the Lord, O my soul, he whispered, not as a command, but as a call to awaken gratitude within himself. Forget not all his benefits. He thought of how the Lord had forgiven him, completely, repeatedly, without hesitation, how he had healed wounds that no physician could mend, both of the body and the heart, how in moments of despair, he had reached down and lifted him from the pit, crowning him not with shame, but with love and compassion. The Lord had not dealt with David as his sins deserved. He had not repaid him according to his failures. Instead, he had drawn near with mercy. David's eyes turned toward the heavens. As high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. He remembered the story of Israel, their rebellion in the wilderness, their grumbling, their doubt, and yet the Lord had remained faithful, slow to anger, overflowing with steadfast love. A father, tender and patient, who remembered that his children were but dust. As far as the east is from the west, David murmured, So far has he removed our transgressions from us. He thought of the generations to come, those who would rise after him, who would stumble just as he had, who would cry out in moments of failure and regret. And he wanted them to know, the mercy of the Lord is not limited. It stretches beyond one lifetime. From everlasting to everlasting, his love remains for those who walk in reverence and truth. The fields before him swayed in the breeze, and David felt the fragility of life. Like grass, he thought, like a flower that blooms and fades. But unlike the fleeting nature of man, the Lord's compassion endures. He is not distant. He sees, he knows, and he is kind. So David lifted his voice, not just for himself, but for the heavens, the angels, the works of God in every place. All of creation, he believed, should praise the one who reigns in mercy. And in the quiet of that moment, as the light faded and the stars began to scatter across the sky, David's soul found rest, not in his strength, not in his righteousness, but in the unshakable truth of who God is. Gracious, compassionate, abounding in love, and full of mercy, always. Psalm 121. The Lord watches over you day and night. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. There are times when the journey feels long, when the road winds upward and our strength begins to fail, when each step forward is met with resistance, and the questions in our hearts grow louder than the answers we hope to hear. In those moments we are reminded to look up, not around, not behind, but up to the hills, to the place where our help comes from. The traveler lifted his gaze. He was not alone on the road, though the silence tried to convince him otherwise. The hills stood tall, unwavering reminders of the one who had formed them with a word. His help did not come from the creation, but from the Creator, the maker of heaven and earth. He who fashioned the stars would not forget his child. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. While the world sleeps, he remains awake. His eyes never grow heavy, and his attention never wavers. Not for a moment does he lose sight of you. He guards your every step. The path may twist, the night may fall, but he does not sleep. Indeed, he who watches over his people neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Lord is your keeper, your protector, your shade at your right hand. When the sun blazes with heat and the burdens of the day weigh heavily upon your shoulders, he is your covering. When the moon rises and darkness creeps in with fears unspoken, he remains by your side. Day and night he is constant, unshaken, ever present. The road may be unknown, but the one who walks beside you is not. He will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life, not just in the great battles but in the small steps, not just in the storms but in the quiet. He guards your going out and your coming in. From the first breath of morning to the last whisper of night, he is with you, yesterday, today, and forever. So lift your eyes. When the journey feels endless and the hills seem too high to climb, lift your eyes. When fear creeps in and questions echo in your heart, lift your eyes. When you feel forgotten, weary, or alone, lift your eyes and see the one who never forgets, the one who never sleeps, the one who never leaves. He is your help, he is your keeper, he is your peace, and he will watch over you both now and forevermore. Psalm 126. Those who sow in tears will reap in joy. Those who sow in tears will reap with songs of joy. The journey back was not just measured in miles, it was measured in memory. The people walked slowly, their feet brushing the dusty path that led home. The exile had been long, the sorrow deep, but now, with each step toward Zion, joy began to stir again. Quiet at first, then rising like a song at dawn. They had dreamed of this day, they had wept for this day, and now it had come. Their mouths were filled with laughter, their tongues with songs of praise. For the Lord had done great things for them. Things they had once feared were lost forever, and the joy felt too good to be true. Like waking from a long and painful dream into a morning of hope, they remembered how it all began, with tears. Tears as they were led away from the land of promise. tears as they hung their harps on foreign trees, tears as they whispered prayers in the silence of captivity. They had sown their sorrow into the soil of faith, trusting that somehow, in some way, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would not forget them. And he hadn't. The Lord had restored their fortunes like streams in the Negev, dry places suddenly flowing with water, barren hearts bursting with life again. What had been empty was now full. What had been broken was now mending. But even in joy, they carried the memory of their sorrow, because the promise wasn't just for the return, it was for every weary soul still waiting, for every tear still falling, for every seed still hidden beneath the earth, the ones sowing in pain, trusting in silence, hoping against hope. To them, this truth still stands. Those who sow in tears will reap in joy. It is not a question of if, but when. For the Lord of the harvest does not forget what is planted in faith. They had gone out weeping, carrying seed to scatter. Each tear, each prayer, each step in obedience had not been wasted. And now, they returned with arms full of sheaves, evidence of God's faithfulness, songs of joy pouring from their lips. This is the rhythm of redemption, the pattern of God's promise. Tears may water the ground, but joy is always the harvest. Pain may last through the night, but joy comes in the morning. So for those who walk through seasons of sorrow, keep sowing. Sow in prayer, sow in trust, sow in worship, even when it hurts. Because the God who restores will come. He sees the tears, he honors the faith, and in his perfect time, he brings the joy. Not just a fleeting happiness, but a deep, soul-filling gladness. Joy that springs up from the very ground watered by your tears. Joy that reminds you he was with you through it all. And one day you too will say, the Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy. Proverbs 4. Guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. The father stood beneath the shade of a fig tree, the sun casting long shadows across the stone path before him. His son was still young, eager, wide-eyed and full of questions about the world. And so the father did what fathers before him had done. He passed on the wisdom he himself had once received. Listen, my son, he began, his voice steady but filled with warmth. Pay attention to my words. Let them live in you, not just for today, but for the days ahead. There was no pride in his tone, no harshness, only the deep urgency of love. He had seen many paths, many choices, many lives that once burned bright, but were extinguished by foolishness. He had learned, often through pain, that the most precious things are not always what we see with our eyes, but what we carry within. I give you sound teaching, he said. Do not let it go. He remembered his own father's voice, strong, loving, clear. He had taught him to seek wisdom like treasure, to hold on to understanding like a lamp in the dark. And now it was his turn to pass that sacred inheritance to the next generation. Get wisdom, he urged. Do not forget my words, or turn away from them. Wisdom, he explained, is not just knowledge. It is a way of life, a path that leads to peace, honor, and clarity. It guards you when you walk, watches over you when you sleep, and speaks to you in the stillness. It is not found in pride, nor in the applause of men, but in humility, in reverence, and in trust. And then his voice softened, leaning closer to his son's listening ear. Above all else, he said, guard your heart. The words hung in the air like sacred fire. Not just your words, not just your actions, your heart. Because the heart is not simply emotion or feeling. It is the wellspring of life. It is where desires are born, where thoughts take root, where dreams are formed. What fills the heart will shape the course of a man's life. Keep your eyes on the path, the father continued. Let your gaze be straight ahead. He spoke of avoiding crooked ways, of turning neither left nor right, not because the world was easy to navigate, but because distraction and temptation often wait just off the path of wisdom. He warned of the way of the wicked, not with fear, but with clarity. Do not set foot on it, he said. It leads only to darkness. The path of the righteous, however, is like the morning sun. It shines brighter and brighter with each step, until the full light of day. And in the center of that path is the heart, hidden from view, yet known by God. So the Father taught his Son, let your heart be filled with truth. Let your words be gentle. Let your steps be sure. For if the heart is pure, the path will follow. If the heart is guarded, the soul will thrive. If the heart is given to God, life will flow in every direction, full of grace, full of light. As the sun dipped low, and the shadows lengthened, the Father placed his hand on his Son's shoulder. Remember these words, he said quietly. They are life to those who find them. And in that sacred moment, wisdom was passed from one heart to another, from the mouth of a father to the ears of a son, not as a lecture, not as a law, but as a gift, a path, a wellspring, a legacy. Proverbs 16. Commit your plans to the Lord and succeed. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. The morning breeze stirred gently through the bustling marketplace of the ancient city. Merchants opened their stalls, craftsmen arranged their tools, and travelers paused to chart their routes. There, among the rhythm of daily life, an old teacher sat beneath a cedar tree, with a scroll spread across his lap. A group of young men gathered around him, drawn not only by curiosity, but by the quiet authority in his presence. They had questions about ambition, success, direction, and dreams. They spoke of plans and pursuits, of rising in the world, of shaping their future with determination and skill. The old man listened with a smile, nodding gently, for he too had once stood at the edge of youthful desire, full of longing to make his mark on the world. Then, with a voice rich in both wisdom and humility, he began to speak. To humans belong the plans of the heart, he said, but from the Lord comes the proper answer of the tongue. The young men leaned in, eager. He continued, all a person's ways may seem pure in their own eyes, but motives are weighed by the Lord. There was a pause, a holy silence, as the weight of those words settled over them. You may have goals, he said. You may set your path and dream your dreams. But know this, only when you commit your plans to the Lord will they find their true direction. Not every good idea is a God idea, and not every path that seems smooth leads to peace. The men shifted, thoughtful now, as the old teacher pointed upward. There is one who sees beyond what you see. He knows not just your steps, but your heart. He knows the hidden desires, the quiet fears, the secret pride. And if you lay your plans at his feet, if you surrender them fully, he will establish them. He will shape them. He will purify your motives and lead you not just to success, but to purpose. One of the young men asked, but what if we fail, even after committing our plans to him? The teacher's eyes softened. Failure in the eyes of men is not failure in the hands of God. Sometimes he redirects us. Sometimes he allows struggle to shape us. But never forget, the Lord works out everything to its proper end, even the things we do not understand. He spoke then of pride, warning them not to exalt themselves, not to trust too much in their own wisdom. Pride goes before destruction, he said, a haughty spirit before a fall. Better to live humbly with the lowly than to share plunder with the proud. He looked around at each of them. Whoever gives heed to instruction prospers, and blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord. There were nods now, agreement blooming slowly, like the first light of dawn. The old teacher knew their hearts burned with desire, but he longed for them to burn also with reverence, with a holy dependence on the one who governs all things. Wisdom, he said, is not just in planning, it is in trusting, and real strength is found not in self-reliance, but in surrender. As the day grew warmer, and the sounds of the city grew louder, the teacher rolled up the scroll and placed it gently beside him. He stood and placed a hand on the shoulder of one of the young men. Go, he said, plan, build, dream, but do so with an open hand. Let the Lord shape what you hold, for when your heart is fully His, your steps will be firm, your plans will find life, and even your failures will become part of His greater story. And as they walked away from the shade of the cedar, each one carried not just the wisdom of a proverb, but the quiet assurance that committing their plans to the Lord would lead them somewhere far greater than success. It would lead them to Him. Ecclesiastes 11. Cast your bread upon the waters with faith. Cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it again. The old man stood at the edge of the river, watching the slow, steady current roll by. In his hands he held a small loaf of bread, simple and unadorned. Around him a group of younger listeners gathered, curious eyes fixed on his every move, hearts hungry for meaning. In a world that often made little sense, he broke the silence. There is a mystery to life, he said, a rhythm we do not always understand. You plant a seed and wait, not knowing if rain will come. You cast your bread upon the waters, unsure if anything will return to you. But still you act, not because of certainty, but because of trust. He lifted the loaf and gently placed it on the river's surface. The water received it without noise, and it floated away, carried by the current, out of sight. Some of the young ones furrowed their brows, confused. He turned to them and spoke softly. This world is not predictable. You may give generously and see no immediate return. You may invest your time, your love, your efforts, and feel as if they've drifted far from you. But do not be discouraged. In the unseen places, God is working. Give portions to 7, yes to 8, he continued, for you do not know what disaster may come upon the land. The message was clear: live generously, hold loosely, trust deeply, for the outcomes are not in your hands but in the hands of the one who sees all. He pointed to the sky. If you wait for perfect weather, you'll never plant. If you study the clouds all day, you'll never reap. So take the step, even when the way is unclear. Sow your seed in the morning, and in the evening, don't let your hands be idle. You don't know which effort will bear fruit, this or that, or perhaps both. The listeners were silent now, hearts quietly stirred. The old man had seen much, seasons of plenty, times of lack. He had known success and sorrow, clarity and confusion, and through it all he had learned the wisdom of faith. Just as you cannot understand the path of the wind, or how life is formed in a mother's womb, he said, you cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things. They nodded, slowly beginning to see. It was not about controlling the outcomes. It was about living with open hands, about giving when there's no promise of return, about planting even when the clouds threaten rain. He looked into their eyes, one by one. Rejoice in the days you're given, he said, and remember your Creator in the midst of them. For life is a gift, and though it passes like a shadow, what is done in faith will never be wasted. The river flowed on. The bread was long gone from sight, but the lesson remained. Sometimes you must release what you hold, and trust that it will return in ways you cannot predict. The good you sow in silence, the love you give without applause, the prayers you whisper in secret, all are seen by the God who governs the currents of life. So cast your bread upon the waters, give freely, love bravely, work faithfully, and trust that in due time, after many days, what you gave in faith will return, not always in the form you expected, but always in the way God intends. For he is faithful, and nothing done in his name is ever lost. Song of Solomon 2. His banner over me is love. He brought me to the banquet hall, and his banner over me was love. The vineyard was in full bloom, its rows bursting with blossoms, the air heavy with fragrance. The hills of Judah stretched softly into the horizon, golden in the afternoon sun. Beneath the shade of a flowering tree, a young bride rested, her eyes closed, her heart stirred with longing. She remembered his voice, gentle but sure, as he called out to her, leaping across the hills, coming swiftly as if drawn by the strings of love itself. She remembered the way he found her, hidden in the clefts of the rock, in the secret places of the hillside, and spoke her name like a song that only he could sing. "Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, come with me," he had said. Those words echoed in her soul. He had drawn her out of the shadows, into the warmth of his embrace. He brought her not to a place of judgment, but to a place of celebration, a banquet hall, bright and full of joy. And above her, displayed for all to see, was the banner of his heart. Not status, not power, but love. She had felt unworthy at times, like a fragile flower among the thorns, but to him she was altogether lovely. He saw beyond her fears, her flaws, her questions. He saw beauty, and he called it forth. His love was not timid, it did not waver, it declared itself openly. "His banner over me is love." She spoke the words quietly, as if they were too precious to say aloud, yet they were true, etched into her spirit, with every glance, every promise, every step he took toward her. Even the seasons seemed to shift at his arrival. "See, the winter is past, the rains are over and gone, flowers appear on the earth, the season of singing has come." Her heart bloomed like the land around her, awakening under the gaze of one who loved her without condition. What was barren was now full of life. What was dormant now stirred with joy. There had been nights of longing, of wondering if love would come, but now she knew. She was seen, she was chosen, she was cherished. And though she still heard the voices of insecurity, whispering from the edges, she rested in something stronger: his commitment, his delight, his covering of love. "Catch for us the foxes," she whispered, "the small things that threatened the vineyard of their union, the hidden fears, the quiet doubts." But she was not alone in this. He was with her, tending to the garden of their love, guarding what was sacred. She leaned against the tree, her thoughts full of him, the one who called her beloved, the one who walked through the fields just to find her, the one who stayed. And in the safety of that love, she rested. It was not a fleeting emotion, it was a banner, lifted high, unwavering, visible to all. It said, "You are mine, and I delight in you." And so, under the shade of affection, in the place of quiet assurance, she let herself be loved, not because she had earned it, but because it had been freely given. "His banner over me is love, a love that seeks, a love that finds, a love that stays." And in that love, she found her home. Isaiah 6. I saw the Lord high and lifted up. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. The air was heavy with silence, the kind that follows sorrow. The king had died, and with him a sense of stability seemed to fade from the land. The people mourned, unsure of what the future would hold. And in the midst of this grief, one man entered the temple, not seeking answers, but simply to be near the presence of God. Isaiah stepped into the sacred space, carrying with him the weight of his nation's loss, and the quiet ache of his own soul. But as he lifted his eyes toward the altar, what he saw was not emptiness, it was glory. A vision unfolded before him that words could barely hold. The Lord, majestic, enthroned, exalted, sat above all earthly thrones. His robe filled the temple like a river of holiness, cascading over every stone and crack with light that seemed alive. Around him flew the seraphim, radiant beings whose voices could shake the very foundations. "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty," they cried. "The whole earth is full of his glory." Their praise did not end. Their voices echoed through eternity, filling the temple with awe. Smoke rose like incense, and the doorposts trembled, not in fear, but in reverence. And Isaiah, he fell. "Woe to me," he cried. "I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty." In that moment, Isaiah saw more than just majesty. He saw his own reflection in its light, the brokenness, the unworthiness, the need for cleansing. But the Lord did not turn away. Instead, one of the seraphim flew to him, carrying a live coal from the altar. The fire touched his lips, not to burn, but to purify. See, the angel said, "This has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for." Grace, it met him in his confession. It reached past his fear and covered him with mercy. And then came the voice of the Lord, not thunderous but clear. "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Isaiah's heart burned with holy fire, and from the ashes of his cleansing, he answered with trembling courage, "Here am I, send me." He had seen the Lord, and he would never be the same. The temple encounter was not just about Isaiah's calling, it was about his transformation. Before he could speak for God, he had to be undone by God. Before he could carry the message, he had to be cleansed by the one who gives it. He saw holiness, and in that sight he found hope. He saw glory, and in that glory he found grace. He saw the King, not a fallen one, not a dying one, but the eternal one, whose throne would never be shaken. And that vision became his anchor. So when the world feels uncertain, when foundations tremble and kings fall, remember Isaiah, remember the vision. There is a throne that is never vacant. There is a glory that never fades. And there is a God who still calls, who cleanses, who sends, who reigns. Lift your eyes. You might just see him, high and lifted up. Isaiah 12. The Lord is my strength and my song. Surely God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord himself is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. The air was quiet, but the heart was full. It was not the quiet of despair, but the calm that follows deliverance, the kind of peace that settles in after a storm has passed. When the sky is clear, and you can finally breathe again, there stood a man, once burdened with fear, now lifted by the grace of God. His voice, once trembling in the face of enemies and uncertainty, had found a new sound, a song, not one of victory by his own strength, but one born of gratitude for the one who had carried him through the darkest valley. He remembered the days when hope felt far away, when judgment loomed like a storm cloud, and the future seemed uncertain. But in the middle of it all, something changed. God had not left. In the place of wrath, he offered mercy. Where fear once ruled, faith now bloomed. And with trembling lips turned upward, he began to speak. "I will praise you, Lord. Though you were angry with me, your anger has turned away, and you have comforted me." There, in that confession, was the heart of it all. God's justice had not disappeared. It had been met. His holiness had not faded. It had been fulfilled. And from that holy exchange, grace flowed like water into the soul of the weary. "Surely God is my salvation," he whispered to himself, the words warming him from within. "I will trust and not be afraid." There had been a time when trust felt impossible, when the future held only shadows and threats. But now the same God who had judged was the one who had saved. The Lord himself had stepped into the story, not just as a sovereign king, but as a personal savior. He had become strength. He had become song. He had become salvation. And so, with hands lifted and eyes lifted higher still, the man cried out to all who would listen, "With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation." This was not just for him. This was for anyone who thirsted, anyone who wandered, anyone who longed to be restored. The invitation was clear. Come to the well. Drink deeply of God's mercy. Let joy be the bucket that draws from his endless grace. And then, the call went out like ripples on a still lake. Give praise to the Lord. Proclaim his name. Make known among the nations what he has done. Sing to the Lord, for he has done glorious things. Let this be known to all the earth. It was not enough to be quietly thankful. This kind of joy demanded proclamation. The salvation he had tasted was too rich, too real to keep to himself. The world needed to hear. From the smallest village to the farthest shore, every soul needed to know. God saves. He heals. He comforts. He restores. He sings over his people with love, and he teaches their hearts to sing in return. So shout aloud and sing for joy, all who dwell in the shelter of the Holy One. For great is the Lord in your midst. He is not far off. He is not distant or distracted. He is here, stronger than every fear, more beautiful than every song. and in him you will find all you need. When your strength runs out, lean into his. When your voice trembles, let his song carry you. When your soul thirsts, draw from the well that never runs dry. He is your strength, he is your song, he is your salvation, always. Isaiah 26. Perfect peace for the one who trusts in him. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, because they trust in you. The dawn broke slowly over the hills and a hush fell upon the city. A silence not of fear but of peace. The kind of peace that does not come from circumstances but from the certainty of who God is. It was a peace that had been forged in the furnace of trial, shaped in the shadows of chaos, and found in the steadfast gaze of a heart fixed on the Lord. There had been turmoil, the people had known fear, the foundations of nations had shaken, yet through it all there remained a remnant. A people whose eyes were not fixed on the rising storm, but on the one who stood above it. A voice rose up among them, not shouting in panic, but declaring with quiet strength, "We have a strong city. God makes salvation its walls and ramparts." This city was not defined by stone or mortar, but by the unseen walls of divine protection, a refuge for the faithful, a haven for those who walked in righteousness. The gates stood open, not for invaders but for the righteous nation that kept faith. And then, a promise came like a gentle wind to a weary soul. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, because they trust in you. Perfect peace, not fleeting calm, not a momentary relief, but a deep, anchored stillness that settles in the soul of the one who trusts. The kind of peace that doesn't vanish when trouble comes but endures, because it is rooted not in what can be seen but in who God is. He is unchanging, he is faithful, he is peace. Trust in the Lord forever, the voice continued. For the Lord himself is the rock eternal. There had been a time when trust was difficult, when eyes were clouded by fear, when hope seemed distant. But those who had chosen to fix their minds on him found something the world could never give, a calm that held steady, even as kingdoms rose and fell. The proud had been brought low, the lofty made humble. But those who walked in faith, those who chose the narrow path of obedience and trust, found their way made straight. Yes, the path of the righteous had not always been easy. There were valleys, there were nights of waiting, there were prayers whispered in the silence. But all along the way God had been present, guiding, refining, loving. The soul that waited on him had learned something precious, that the Lord is worth trusting, that his timing is perfect, that his peace is real. Lord, the prayer rose from the depths of a heart surrendered. You establish peace for us. All that we have accomplished, you have done for us. There was no pride left, only praise. Every victory, every step of progress, every ounce of strength had come from his hand. And in that place of surrender, true peace was born. The shadows of the past no longer held power. The trials of the present could not steal what had been secured in trust. For the heart that leaned on him had found something immovable, perfect peace. So to all who are weary, to those whose thoughts spin like restless wind, to the ones searching for calm in the chaos, fix your mind on him. Lean into the rock that never crumbles. Let your soul rest in the one who holds every tomorrow. He is the keeper of peace, the giver of strength, the anchor in the storm. And if you trust in him, not with a fleeting glance but with a steadfast gaze, you will find what the world cannot offer. Perfect peace, unshakable, enduring, yours in him, always. Isaiah 30. In quietness and trust is your strength. In repentance and rest is your salvation. In quietness and trust is your strength. But you would have none of it. The city was bustling. Decisions were being made in haste. Alliances formed without counsel. And the people, though surrounded by movement, were drifting far from their maker. There was fear in the air, a silent undercurrent of anxiety. They saw threats rising on the horizon, and believed the answer lay in swift action, in forming their own plans, in running toward help that looked powerful, but lacked the presence of God. They turned to Egypt for protection, an old, once enslaving force, and sought strength, where there was none. They relied on chariots, not on the voice of the Lord. They rushed toward solutions, shaped by human wisdom, forgetting the one who had parted the sea, who had led them with cloud and fire. And still the Lord waited, not with anger ready to erupt, not with a clenched fist, but with a heart full of compassion. He said gently, "In repentance and rest is your salvation. In quietness and trust is your strength." But they had not listened. They had chosen noise over stillness, plans over prayer, horses over hope. Yet he did not abandon them. The Holy One waited patiently, not because he was indifferent, but because he longed to be gracious. He longed to draw them back to himself. His desire was not to punish but to restore, not to scold, but to heal. Therefore the Lord longs to be gracious to you. Therefore he will rise up to show you compassion. For the Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are all who wait for him. What a picture of mercy! The Creator of the heavens waiting for his people to stop striving and come home to his arms. The strength they longed for wasn't in battle strategy. It wasn't in rushing forward. It was in returning, in resting, in quietness, in trust. Because real strength isn't loud. It isn't frantic or desperate. Real strength is found in surrender. When the soul bows low before the Lord, when the heart says, "I cannot do this alone," when plans are laid down and trust is lifted up, there in the quiet, God meets his people. He promises that when they cry out again, he will answer. When they turn their eyes to him, he will guide them. Whether they turn to the right or the left, his voice will whisper, "This is the way, walk in it." The idols they once leaned on will be cast aside. The false hopes will lose their grip, and once more the land will be blessed. The barren places will bloom. The drought will give way to rivers, the silence to songs of praise. Because when God restores, he doesn't hold back. He heals fully. He leads gently. He speaks clearly. To the one who has been running, trying to fix everything. To the heart that is tired from striving, from leaning on broken supports. Hear the invitation again. Come back, rest, be still, trust. For it is not in the noise that you will be made strong. Not in the rush, not in the plan, but in the quiet, in the trust, in the presence of the one who holds your every breath. This is where strength lives. This is where salvation begins. In the stillness of a heart yielded to him, always. Isaiah 54. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. No weapon that is formed against you will prosper. And every tongue that accuses you in judgment you will condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their vindication is from me, declares the Lord. The silence after the storm was heavy. The people, once scattered and broken, now stood with hearts uncertain and eyes searching for signs of hope. They had known exile. They had tasted rejection. Their city had been left in ruins, and their identity felt buried beneath the weight of loss. Yet into that silence a promise rang out. Not a whisper, but a declaration. Sing, O barren one. It made no sense at first. To sing when there was no child. To rejoice when sorrow still echoed. But the voice of the Lord called his people to lift their heads. Not because of what they saw, but because of what he had spoken. He told them to enlarge their tents, stretch out the cords, and make room for blessing. Because something new was coming. Restoration, expansion, redemption. You will forget the shame of your youth, he said, and remember no more the reproach of your widowhood. The God who called himself their maker, the one who fashioned stars and set boundaries for the sea, was also their husband, their redeemer. He had seen their affliction, and now he would not only restore what was lost, he would go beyond it. For a brief moment he had hidden his face, as a husband who turns away in sorrow. But now, with everlasting kindness, he would gather them close again. The anger had passed. The separation was over. The covenant of peace would never be removed. He reminded them of the flood, that moment of judgment in Noah's day. But just as he had sworn never to flood the earth again, he now swore never to be angry with them again. His love was steadfast, his promises unshaken. Though the mountains be shaken and the hills be removed, yet my unfailing love for you will not be shaken. The city that once felt forsaken would be rebuilt with beauty, foundations of sapphires, walls of precious stones. Every child taught by the Lord, peace multiplied, righteousness as their covering. And then came the words that would echo through generations. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, not because weapons wouldn't be formed, not because accusations wouldn't rise, but because the Lord himself would stand as their defender, their covering, their shield. Every voice raised against them would fall. Every arrow aimed at their heart would miss its mark, because they belonged to him. This was not a fragile hope. It was an inheritance, the heritage of those who serve the Lord, a seal of divine protection, a promise that no attack could undo what God had established. To the weary heart today, to the soul that feels surrounded, to the one facing accusations, battles, and unseen threats, you are not defenseless. The Lord is your righteousness. The Lord is your vindication. He has promised to stand with you, and no plan of the enemy can succeed against his word. So sing again, stretch your tent, lift your eyes. He is not done with you, and though the storm has come and gone, the promise remains. You are covered, you are chosen, you are his, and no weapon, no matter how sharp, no matter how loud, will ever prosper against the one God has called his own, always. Isaiah 61. Beauty for ashes and the oil of gladness, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. The streets were quiet as the sun began to rise, casting long golden shadows across the ruins. What once stood tall and proud was now broken. Walls crumbled, gates burned, hopes scattered like dust in the wind. But in the stillness, a voice echoed with promise. He came not with a sword, but with words, not to conquer with power, but to restore with love. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, he said, for he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. There were some who had given up listening, hearts hardened by grief, ears dulled by disappointment, but others leaned in, drawn by something deeper than sound. They recognized truth in his voice, gentle, yet unwavering. He spoke to the broken-hearted, to the ones who mourned in silence, to those who had been captive to sorrow, wrapped in shame, bound by invisible chains. And with every word, it was as if light began to break through the cracks. I have come to bind up the broken, to proclaim freedom to those in chains, to comfort all who mourn. It wasn't empty comfort. It wasn't a glossing over of pain. He acknowledged the ashes, the evidence of what was lost, what had burned away. But he didn't leave them in the dust. Instead, he offered a crown. In place of mourning, he poured oil, sweet and fragrant, the kind used to anoint, to bless, to heal. Where there had been despair, he wrapped them in garments of praise, as if to say, you don't wear your sorrow forever. They will be called oaks of righteousness, he declared, a planting of the Lord, for the display of his splendor. It was hard to imagine at first that from ruins could rise strength, that from tears could grow joy. But his words painted a vision far greater than what the eye could see. The ancient ruins would be rebuilt, the desolate places restored. Generations who knew only shame would walk in honor. Instead of being forgotten, they would be known as priests of the Lord, ministers of hope, carriers of blessing. For I, the Lord, love justice, he said. I hate robbery and wrongdoing. In my faithfulness, I will reward my people. And there, in the midst of destruction, a song began to stir. The people who had once mourned lifted their eyes. They looked not at what was lost, but at what could be. They saw beauty begin to bloom where ashes once lay. They saw a garden growing in a place that had been barren, and deep within them, something shifted. They would rejoice in the Lord, not because the pain had never been real, but because grace had reached deeper still. They would walk clothed in garments of salvation, wrapped in robes of righteousness. They were not what they had been. They were new. The world may have known them by their wounds, their failures, their scars, but the Lord called them by another name. Redeemed, restored, delighted in. So let your soul remember this. When the ashes feel heavy and the night seems long, there is one who trades sorrow for joy, one who gives beauty in place of what was broken. one who sings over you with gladness, and plants you like an oak, firm and unshaken. For he is faithful, he is near, and he is making all things new, always. Jeremiah 1. Before I formed you, I knew you. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. It began in the quiet town of Anathoth, just a young man living among priests, not seeking greatness, not imagining the weight of calling that would soon rest upon his shoulders. Jeremiah was not a man of power or fame. He was simply one known by God, and that was enough. One day the word of the Lord came to him, not gently but with purpose, sharp and clear like a morning wind stirring still waters. It didn't ask permission. It declared a truth that had existed long before Jeremiah ever took a breath. Before I formed you, I knew you. The words pierced the soul. They spoke of intimacy, of intention, of a love that began not in the cradle but in eternity. Jeremiah had been known, crafted by the Creator with a purpose far beyond what his eyes could yet see. But the calling did not come without fear. Alas, Sovereign Lord, Jeremiah replied, I do not know how to speak. I am too young. How often does the heart respond this way? When faced with the greatness of God's call, we see only our own limits, our youth, our weakness, our stammering tongue. But God does not see as man sees. He does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. Do not say, I am too young. The Lord said, you must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you. Then the Lord reached out his hand and touched Jeremiah's mouth, a divine touch, gentle yet full of authority. The same mouth that had trembled in self-doubt was now set apart for heaven's words. I have put my words in your mouth. Jeremiah would not speak from fear but from fire, a fire kindled by God himself. I appoint you over nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant. It was no small task. The road ahead would not be smooth. Jeremiah would weep, be rejected, and feel the ache of isolation. But he would also carry truth, light and hope into dark places. He would be a voice crying out, not because he was strong, but because he was chosen. The Lord showed him visions, an almond branch, quick to bloom, reminding Jeremiah that God watches over his word to fulfill it, and a boiling pot, tilted from the north, foretelling coming judgment. Jeremiah would need courage, not the kind born of human strength, but the kind rooted in God's unwavering presence. Get yourself ready, God said. Stand up and say to them whatever I command you. God never promised ease, but he did promise this. They will fight against you, but will not overcome you, for I am with you and will rescue you. Jeremiah's story is not just about a prophet long ago. It's about every soul who hears God's call and wonders if they're enough. It's about the fears that rise and the grace that covers. It's about the God who sees beyond our weakness and speaks identity into our doubt. You may feel small, unprepared, unworthy, but before he formed you, he knew you. Before you took your first breath, he set you apart. And even now he appoints you to live, to speak, to shine, to trust. So do not say, I am too young, or I am not enough. Say instead, here I am, Lord, send me. For the one who called Jeremiah still calls today, and the one who touched the prophet's mouth now places his word in your heart. You are known, you are chosen, and you are never alone. Jeremiah 17. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord. But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. There are paths in life that seem strong underfoot, roots paved with self-reliance, success, and strength that appears secure. Yet with time, even the most confident steps can falter when trust is placed in anything other than God. Jeremiah stood in the midst of a people who had chosen such a path. The nation of Judah, once guided by the hand of the Lord, had turned their hearts away. Their trust had shifted from the God who rescued them to the strength of men, from the eternal fountain to broken cisterns that could hold no water. And so the word of the Lord came again. This is what the Lord says. Cursed is the one who trusts in man, who draws strength from mere flesh, and whose heart turns away from the Lord. Like a bush in the wastelands, that person is dry, brittle, and rootless, dwelling in a land of salt and emptiness. They may appear to thrive for a season, but without the deep waters of God's presence, their strength cannot endure. But then, a contrast, a promise, a picture of what it looks like to live another way. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. That person is like a tree planted by the water, deep roots reaching into the life-giving stream. They are not shaken when heat comes. Their leaves stay green. Even in drought, they bear fruit. This is the life of trust, not a life without hardship, but one anchored in a source that never runs dry. Jeremiah knew this truth well. He carried the burden of a prophet, called to speak to those who would not listen, to weep over a people who did not see. Yet he trusted, not in the outcome, but in the one who had called him. And in the midst of these declarations, the Lord exposed something deeper. The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? It is a sobering reminder. Our hearts, though capable of great love, are also prone to wander. We may not always see our own motives clearly, but there is one who does. I, the Lord, search the heart and examine the mind. God knows every hidden thought, every fear, every fragile place we try to hide. And still, he invites us to trust him, not just in word, but with the whole heart. Jeremiah lifted his voice in response, not in defiance, but in surrender. Heal me, Lord, and I will be healed. Save me, and I will be saved, for you are the one I praise. It was not a cry of pride, but a confession of dependence. Jeremiah knew that healing, hope, and strength could only come from the Lord. In the end, it is not our circumstances that define us, but where we place our trust. The one who leans on human wisdom may find comfort for a moment, but it will fade. The one who roots their life in God will remain unshaken, even in seasons of drought. For when storms rise, it is not the tallest tree that stands, but the one most deeply rooted. So, let your trust be in the Lord. Let your confidence be in the one who sees the heart and heals it. Let your soul be planted by the stream of his goodness, drawing strength from waters that never run dry. You will not fear when heat comes. Your leaves will stay green. You will bear fruit, even in seasons of waiting. For blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, and in him you will never be barren, never alone, never forgotten. Lamentations 3. Great is your faithfulness in every season. Because of the Lord's great love we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. There are seasons when the sky feels heavy with sorrow, when each step forward feels like a struggle, and even hope seems distant. For the prophet Jeremiah, this was not just poetry, it was the reality of his people, and the cry of his own heart. Jerusalem, once filled with joy and song, now lay desolate. The streets were silent. The temple, where praises once rose, was reduced to ashes. Grief hovered over the land like a cloud that would not lift. In the heart of this devastation, Jeremiah wrote, I am the man who has seen affliction by the rod of the Lord's wrath. He began. His words were raw, his pain unfiltered. He spoke of darkness instead of light, of broken bones and bitterness, of feeling shut in, trapped, unheard. He described his soul as bowed down, crushed beneath the weight of sorrow. And yet, even in the middle of mourning, something powerful rose within him. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The shift was quiet, almost unnoticed at first, but it was real. Because of the Lord's great love we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. It was not a denial of the pain, but a declaration in the midst of it, a light flickering in the shadows, stubborn against the dark. God's faithfulness had not left. His mercy had not run dry. His love had not changed with the seasons. Every morning, even those filled with weeping, came with new mercy, fresh compassion, a reminder that God's faithfulness endures, even when everything else seems to fall away. Jeremiah's soul, once bowed low, began to rise again. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. To wait for the Lord is to trust that he is still writing the story, even when the chapter feels unbearable. It's to believe that sorrow may last for a night, but joy comes with the morning. Not always quickly, but surely. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, to the one who seeks him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. Jeremiah was not just writing for himself. His words carried the weight of generations, those who had suffered loss, those who had wandered far, those who had forgotten that even in judgment, God's mercy was present, and still God remained faithful, unshaken, close. Though the world around them crumbled, God's character did not. For no one is cast off by the Lord forever. Though he brings grief, he will show compassion. So great is his unfailing love. The same hand that allowed sorrow also held the power to restore. The same voice that spoke judgment would speak again of healing. Jeremiah looked honestly at the suffering, but he also looked beyond it, to the God who hears, to the God who restores, to the God who is faithful in every season. So when your heart feels heavy, and your soul is weary, when the night is long, and comfort feels far, remember these words. His mercies are new every morning. His compassions never fail. Great is his faithfulness. Even in the ashes, his promises remain. Even in the waiting, his love holds firm. And in every season, joy or sorrow, loss or restoration, he is there, unchanging, present, faithful. Ezekiel 11. I will give you a new heart and spirit. I will give them an undivided heart, and put a new spirit in them. I will remove from them their heart of stone, and give them a heart of flesh. The city of Jerusalem, once the place where God's presence dwelled among his people, had become a place of rebellion, corruption, and sorrow. The prophet Ezekiel stood among the exiles in Babylon, far from the holy city, his heart burdened with the weight of judgment and loss. He had seen visions of God's glory departing from the temple, witnessed the unthinkable, the presence of the Lord lifting from the place where it once rested. The people had turned away, chasing idols and forsaking the covenant, and now the consequences had come. The land was broken, the people scattered, hope seemed distant. But even in the midst of exile, God spoke. As Ezekiel stood watching, the hand of the Lord came upon him once more, lifting him in a vision to the gates of the temple in Jerusalem. There, leaders who should have guided the people in righteousness had instead filled the city with violence and led others into false confidence. They said, "This city is the pot, and we are the meat," believing they were safe in their disobedience. But the Lord saw their hearts. "You have brought ruin," God said. "You have shed blood and led my people astray." The judgment was real, and it was near. Yet in the midst of these heavy words, something unexpected unfolded. A promise not of punishment, but of transformation. As Ezekiel watched, God revealed a future hope. This is what the sovereign Lord says: "I will gather you from the nations and bring you back from the countries where you have been scattered." Though the people had been driven far from their land, God had not forgotten them. He would not leave them in exile forever. He would bring them back, not just physically but spiritually. A deeper restoration was coming. "I will give them an undivided heart, and put a new spirit in them." It wasn't enough to return to the land. Their hearts needed to change. Their spirits needed renewing. They had lived with hardened hearts, chasing after lifeless idols, turning from the living God. But now, God promised something miraculous. "I will remove from them their heart of stone, and give them a heart of flesh." Hearts of stone, cold, unfeeling, resistant, would be replaced by hearts of flesh, alive to his presence, tender to his word. The people would no longer follow God out of obligation or fear, but out of love. Their obedience would flow from a heart that truly knew him. Then they will follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. They will be my people, and I will be their God. This was not a return to empty religion. It was a promise of relationship. God wasn't only restoring a nation. He was restoring hearts. He was preparing a people who would know him, love him, and walk closely with him once more. Ezekiel, standing in the vision, could feel the weight of both judgment and mercy. God had every right to turn away, but instead he leaned in. He offered a new beginning, and that promise echoes still. To every heart that has grown cold, to every soul that has wandered far, to every life weighed down by regret and rebellion, there is hope. God still gives new hearts. He still breathes new life. Where once there was hardness, he brings softness. Where there was resistance, he brings surrender. Where there was distance, he brings closeness. He doesn't simply repair what was broken. He makes all things new. So when you feel far from him, when your heart feels heavy, dry, or distant, remember his promise. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. This is the work of grace, not earned, not forced, but freely given by the one who never stops pursuing his people. He does not leave you in exile. He does not abandon you to your failures. He comes to restore. Let him exchange your heart of stone for a heart that beats with life. Let him place his spirit within you and lead you back to himself. For he is still the God who says, "You will be my people, and I will be," and he is still faithful to make all things new. Ezekiel 36. I will sprinkle clean water and make you new. I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your impurities and from all your idols. There are times when the soul feels worn, weighed down by the residue of sin, regret, and wandering. Moments when we long to start again, to be made clean, inside and out. In the desolate aftermath of exile, the people of Israel stood in that very place. Ruined cities, shattered hopes, and hearts that had strayed far from their God. But even there, in the midst of brokenness, God began to speak through the prophet Ezekiel, and his words were not filled with condemnation, but with promise. The mountains of Israel, once trampled and mocked by surrounding nations, would soon bear fruit again. The land, long desolate, would flourish once more. And it wasn't just about physical restoration. God was after something far deeper. This is what the sovereign Lord says: "It is not for your sake, people of Israel, that I am going to do these things, but for the sake of my holy name." God had seen the rebellion. He had watched his people chase after false gods, defile his name, and lose their way. Yet he was not finished with them. He would not let their story end in ruin. For the sake of his name, for the sake of his faithfulness and love, he would act. I will show the holiness of my great name, which has been profaned among the nations. Then the nations will know that I am the Lord. And then, the promise began to unfold. Not only would the people return to their land, they would be renewed. I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. No longer stained by guilt or shame, no longer defined by their past mistakes. God himself would do the cleansing. He would wash away every impurity, every idol, every trace of rebellion. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. It was more than forgiveness. It was transformation. The old hardened heart that had grown cold and distant would be replaced by a heart of flesh, soft, responsive, and alive. A new spirit would breathe life where there had once been only dryness. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh, and I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees. No longer would obedience feel like a burden. With the Spirit of God dwelling within them, his people would walk in his ways, not out of fear, but out of love. Their desires would be changed, their path realigned. They would return to the land, yes, but more than that, they would return to the Lord. You will be my people, and I will be your God. This was a covenant renewed, a relationship restored, a holy God choosing once again to dwell among an unworthy people, not because of their goodness, but because of his. I will save you from all your uncleanness. I will call for the grain and make it plentiful. The desolate land will be cultivated instead of lying desolate in the sight of all who pass through it. What had once been ruined would be renewed. What had once been dead would be brought back to life, and the nations would see it. They would witness the miracle, not just of restored fields and rebuilt cities, but of hearts made whole. They would know that the God of Israel was not distant or silent, but alive and merciful, able to redeem what seemed beyond repair. Then God made this promise: I the Lord have spoken, and I will do it. There is no stain too deep for his cleansing, no heart too hard for his healing, no past too broken for his restoration. When you feel unworthy, when you feel too far gone, too stained by what has been, remember this promise: he will sprinkle clean water on you. He will make you new, not because you've earned it, not because you fixed yourself, but because he is gracious. He is the God who gives new hearts. He is the God who breathes new life. He is the God who keeps his word. So come to him. Let him cleanse you. Let him change you from the inside out. Let him write a new story with your life, for he has spoken, and he will do it. Daniel 1. Faithful in the small things and honored by God. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. It was the beginning of exile, a time when the world of the Israelites had been turned upside down. The temple was plundered, the people taken captive, and a new kingdom ruled over them. Among those taken to Babylon were young men from royal and noble families, chosen for their intelligence, appearance, and promise. Among them was Daniel. He was far from home. The customs were foreign, the language unfamiliar, and the temptations many. Babylon was a land of splendor and seduction, where compromise could easily be disguised as survival. And yet in that unfamiliar land, Daniel made a quiet, courageous choice. He resolved in his heart he would not defile himself with the king's rich food or wine, delicacies that had likely been offered to idols, things that went against the ways of the Lord. It may have seemed like a small matter, a seemingly insignificant line to draw, but for Daniel, faithfulness began with the small things. Though he was young, though he was a foreigner, though he was under the authority of a powerful empire, Daniel did not waver. With humility and wisdom, he approached the chief official and requested a different path: permission to eat only vegetables and drink water. Not with rebellion, but with quiet conviction. And God honored him. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. Even in exile, God was at work. His hand was on Daniel. And through a simple test, 10 days of a different diet, God began to reveal the power of obedience. At the end of the 10 days, Daniel and his friends looked healthier and better nourished than any of the others who had eaten the royal food. It wasn't the vegetables that made the difference. It was God's favor poured out on those who honored him. And more than physical strength, God gave them wisdom. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. Their faithfulness in small decisions became the foundation for future greatness. Because they chose obedience in quiet, unseen moments, God prepared them for influence in the midst of kings and empires. When the time came to stand before King Nebuchadnezzar, the young men did not falter. They had already learned to stand when no one else was watching. And now, under the scrutiny of the most powerful ruler of their time, they stood with excellence. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. Faithfulness does not always begin with grand gestures. It often begins in the small things: what we eat, what we choose, what we allow or refuse. Daniel's story reminds us that God sees every act of obedience, no matter how small, and he honors those who honor him. You may feel like you're in a foreign land, a place that doesn't reflect your values or your faith. You may feel small or unseen, wondering if your quiet choices matter, but they do. God sees, God knows, and God responds to faithfulness with favor. The story of Daniel is not just about dietary choices or prophetic dreams. It's about a heart fully given to God, even when everything around you says to compromise. So choose obedience in the quiet places. Stand firm when no one else is watching. Be faithful in the small things, because those moments are the beginning of something greater. For the God who watches in secret is the same God who raises up in public. The God who honors those who walk in his ways is the God who still rewards those who trust in him. Let Daniel's story remind you, in a world full of compromise, the faithful shine bright. And when you choose obedience over comfort, when you honor God with your life, he will honor you in his perfect time. Hosea 2. God's love restores and redeems completely. Therefore, I am now going to allure her. I will lead her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her. There are seasons when love feels distant, when hearts drift, promises break, and faithfulness is forgotten. The people of Israel had turned away, chasing idols, giving their hearts to false gods, and forgetting the one who had rescued them from slavery and called them his own. Yet, in the midst of betrayal, God did not walk away. Through the prophet Hosea, God spoke a message both tender and piercing, a story of a broken marriage used to reflect a broken covenant, and a divine love that refuses to give up. Israel had gone after other lovers. She had credited false gods with the blessings that came from the Lord. Her soul, once devoted, had become distracted by lesser things. But even in her unfaithfulness, God's response was not to destroy, but to restore. He would lead her back. Therefore, I will block her path with thorn bushes. I will wall her in, so she cannot find her way. It wasn't punishment for punishment's sake. It was redirection, a wilderness walk, not to abandon, but to awaken. He would remove every false path, so she might finally see the truth. The wilderness wasn't a place of rejection, it was a place of restoration. There I will give her back her vineyards, and will make the valley of Achor a door of hope. The valley of Achor, once a place of trouble, would become a place of hope. What had been broken would be made whole. What had been taken would be returned. God's voice was not angry and harsh. It was gentle and kind. He spoke tenderly, not to condemn, but to call her back. In that day, declares the Lord, you will call me my husband. You will no longer call me my master. This was not a relationship of fear, but of love. God was not looking for forced obedience, but for a heart drawn close again in affection and trust. He promised to remove every idol, every false source of security. He would protect her, draw her near, and make a new covenant, a promise not written in stone, but upon her heart. I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you in righteousness and justice, in love and compassion. The language wasn't just legal, it was deeply relational, a vow of love spoken by the one who never breaks his promises. God would take the shame of the past and replace it with mercy. He would sow hope where sorrow once lived, and he would rename his people, not forsaken, but beloved. In that day, I will respond, declares the Lord, responding not just to their needs, but to their cries for forgiveness, their hunger for wholeness. I will show my love to the one I called not love. I will say to those called not my people, you are my people. And they will say, you are my God. This is the heart of redemption, not just rescue from judgment, but restoration into relationship. Not just forgiveness, but a future. Maybe you've wandered too. Maybe your heart has chased other things. Success, approval, comfort, control. Maybe you've forgotten the one who loved you first. But his love hasn't changed. Even in your wilderness, he is drawing you close, speaking tenderly, waiting patiently, not to condemn, but to restore. He doesn't just call you back, he calls you his own. So let him remove the idols. Let him walk with you through the valleys. Let him rewrite your story, because in the places where shame once ruled, he plants seeds of mercy. In the deserts of disappointment, he builds gardens of grace. And in the hearts that return to him, he makes all things new. This is the love of God, a love that redeems completely, a love that restores without condition, a love that never lets go. Joel 2. I will pour out my spirit on all people. And afterward, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men will see visions. The land had been stripped bare. Locusts had devoured the fields, and the sky had darkened with smoke. What once blossomed with life now lay in ruins, a reflection of the people's hearts, distant from God, dry and cracked like the earth beneath them. But in the desolation, God was not silent. Through the prophet Joel, he called to his people, not with a voice of anger, but with a plea for return. Even now, declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting and weeping and mourning. It wasn't too late, not even in the aftermath of devastation. God's invitation was clear. Come back, not with empty ritual, not with surface repentance, but with torn hearts, a surrender that reached past the surface and touched the soul. Rend your heart, and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in love. This was the true heart of God, a God who disciplines, yes, but always with the goal of restoration, a God who longed not to destroy his people, but to revive them. And so the people gathered, old and young, priest and farmer, bride and child. They came together to cry out to the Lord, in humility, in hope, in hunger for something more. Then came the promise, I am sending you grain, new wine and olive oil, enough to satisfy you fully. God would restore what was lost. The fields would once again be filled. The rain would fall in due season. The shame would be removed, and the joy of his presence would return. I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten, not just the crops but the lost time, the wasted seasons, the broken dreams and the weary days. Every moment surrendered in repentance would be redeemed. And then, as the land was being renewed, God revealed something even greater, something not just for Israel, but for the world. I will pour out my spirit on all people. This wasn't just about physical restoration, it was about spiritual awakening. The Spirit of God once reserved for prophets and kings would be poured out on all flesh. Sons and daughters would prophesy, old men would dream again, young men would see visions, servants, women, children. No one left out, no one overlooked. God was promising something revolutionary, a time when his presence would dwell, not just in temples of stone, but in hearts of flesh, when his voice would not be distant, but near, whispered in dreams, thundered in visions, spoken through every generation. And this outpouring would be a sign, a signal of mercy before the day of judgment, an invitation for all who would listen. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. This was the hope given to Joel's generation, and to ours, that no matter how far we've fallen, no matter how dry the land or barren the soul, the Spirit of God is ready to be poured out, not in a trickle, but in abundance, not in part, but in fullness. So come, return, rend your heart. He is gracious, he is compassionate, and he is ready to restore what was lost, and to pour out what was never before known. This is the God who revives, the God who redeems, the God who renews his people by his Spirit from generation to generation. And his promise still stands, his Spirit still moves, and his invitation still echoes. Call on my name and live. Amos 5. Seek the Lord and live. Seek the Lord and live, or he will sweep through the tribes of Joseph like a fire. It will devour them, and Bethel will have no one to quench it. The land was still prosperous, the markets full, the cities humming with the sound of daily life. But beneath the surface something was breaking. Justice had grown silent, righteousness had been cast aside, and the cries of the oppressed echoed unheard through the streets. Amos, a simple shepherd and dresser of sycamore figs, had been called by God, not to soothe, but to awaken. His words were not welcomed by the powerful, yet they burned with the urgency of divine truth. "Seek me and live," declared the Lord through Amos. It was a call not just to turn from sin, but to turn toward the one who gives life. The people had sought many things: wealth, status, comfort, but not the Lord. They clung to places like Bethel and Gilgal, religious centers filled with ritual but empty of repentance. And God warned that those places would offer no safety. "Do not seek Bethel. Do not go to Gilgal. Do not journey to Beersheba," Amos cried. "For Gilgal will surely go into exile, and Bethel will be reduced to nothing." Their religion had become a performance. Their sacrifices were many, their songs loud, but their hearts were far from the God they claimed to worship. They had forgotten what mattered most: mercy, justice, humility, and truth. There are those who turn justice into bitterness and cast righteousness to the ground. The Lord saw it all: the bribes, the corruption, the crushed poor, the silence of those who should have spoken up, and He would not overlook it. But even in judgment, His mercy reached out like a lifeline. "Seek good, not evil, that you may live. Then the Lord God Almighty will be with you." It was not too late. If only they would turn. If only they would repent. Not just in words, but in action. Not just with offerings, but with lives shaped by the heart of God. I despise your religious festivals," said the Lord. "Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them." God was not interested in empty songs or hollow praise. What He desired was justice flowing like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream, a people who loved what He loved and lived as He called them to live. In the midst of a complacent nation, Amos's voice thundered with warning, but also with hope. If they would seek the Lord, not the comforts of tradition, not the strength of their wealth, but the presence of the living God, then life would return. Not just survival, but true life, rooted in justice, grounded in truth, overflowing with mercy. And the same call echoes still: seek the Lord and live. Not in the noise of religion without relationship, not in self-made security, but in the quiet place where hearts are laid bare before Him. Seek good, hate evil, establish justice. Let your worship not be in word alone, but in the way you walk, the way you love, the way you stand for what is right. For the Lord Almighty is not distant. He is near to those who seek Him in spirit and in truth. And He still calls out, "Return to me and live." Jonah 2. From the depths I cried, and the Lord answered. The sea was not calm. It roared with wrath, foaming at the mouth like a wild beast loosed from its cage. Winds lashed against the boat. Sailors cried out to their gods, and chaos churned above the deep. But deeper still, beneath the waves, beneath the storm, beneath the reach of light, sank a man named Jonah. He had run, not just from Nineveh, but from obedience, from mercy, from the face of the Lord. He had boarded a ship to flee the presence of the God who made the very seas he now drowned in. And yet even in flight, the Lord pursued. Jonah had expected silence, judgment, an end. But what he found instead was strange grace, a great fish, appointed not to destroy, but to save, a living tomb, a waiting place. Inside the belly of the deep, wrapped in the press of darkness, Jonah prayed. In my distress I called to the Lord, and He answered me. His voice, muffled by waters and swallowed by shadows, still reached the ears of heaven. For even there, beneath all hope, beneath all pride, grace found him. You hurled me into the depths, Jonah said, into the very heart of the seas. All your waves and breakers swept over me. He did not blame the sailors. He did not curse the storm. He understood now. This descent was not abandonment. It was intervention. The Lord had not cast him off. He had cast him down to draw him back. Jonah remembered the temple, the place of God's presence, and though he was far from its courts, he lifted his heart toward it, toward the God he had once turned his back on. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. He saw now what he had not seen before, that idols, no matter how comfortable or convenient, are lies, that running from God only leads to despair, that even in rebellion, the Lord's mercy is never out of reach. Those who cling to worthless idols, he confessed, forfeit the grace that could be theirs. And then the declaration, the shift, the surrender. But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed I will make good. I will say salvation comes from the Lord. From the depths of the sea, Jonah rediscovered the height of God's mercy. And then, as if in response to his prayer, the fish obeyed the voice of the one who commands sea and storm alike. Jonah was released, not just from the fish, but from the grip of disobedience. Spit onto dry land, drenched and broken, but alive. Because the mercy of God does not abandon us in our failures, it meets us there. From the depths we cry, and the Lord answers, not because we deserve it, but because He is who He is, gracious, patient, pursuing, unrelenting in love. So if you find yourself sinking into shame, into regret, into places you never intended to go, remember Jonah, remember the belly of the fish, remember the dark that became a sanctuary, and know, it is never too late to turn back, never too far to be heard, never too deep to be reached. Salvation comes from the Lord, even from the depths.